Many people ask me questions about Stoic philosophy and practice. I've created this series to provide short answers to the most common, recurring, or confusing questions about Stoicism. This question, what does Oikeiosis mean in a Stoic context, is a very good one to ask whenever we're encountering foreign language terms being used quite frequently. Then we want to know what they mean. And I think that Oikeiosis has been brought up an awful lot in modern Stoic context. It is an important term in classical Stoic ethical theory, although it doesn't show up that much in some of the texts that we do have. So it's well worth clarifying what the term actually means and what its significance is within a Stoic framework. Oikeiosis, lexically speaking, is a noun that signifies a kind of action. So it's a noun that signifies a verb, which is also coming from another noun, and that is oikos. In classical Greek, oikos means house, but it doesn't just mean the building that you might build and then live in. It means the entire extended family, household, you could say, all the people that are involved there. So that is the core idea that then is getting transposed into a kind of action. What is that action then? Well, it's been translated in various ways. One is affiliation, or appropriation is another, endearment. I think another term that we could use is concern once we get to the specifically Stoic meaning of this term. And all of that should be read into this. It's not an easy term to translate, but it's not an impossible term to translate either. And each of those translations that I've given you can work in some situations. What then does this term mean within the context of Stoicism? So the Stoics treated this in a rather complex way, and it's important to maintain a distinction that I'm now going to introduce you to. That's a distinction between Oikeiosis, as possessed by pretty much every animal, and then the Oikeiosis that is particular to human beings as rational and thereby social animals, different from the other animals within the whole kingdom of animal life. So the Stoics say that every animal has Oikeiosis in relation to itself. Now, what does this mean? It means that they want to preserve their own life and find the things that conduce to living well in their particular way, that conduce to living and continuing to augment that life. So that's part of it. But it also consists in a kind of self-perception, a conception and grasp of one's own body in relation to other things. And the Stoics think that every single animal has this, and little babies, for human beings, also have this. That's the first type, and it gets a bit different when we start talking about human beings. And there's a bit of analogy here. Other animals, at least some of them, do take care of their young, and sometimes recognize others of their own kind in ways that show concern as well. And that would be oikeiosis. That's not oikeiosis of their own bodies, but that's oikeiosis in relation to an other. And for human beings, this becomes particularly important. It lies at the very basis of really all of the relations of affection or concern or even duty that we have towards other people, that we as rational beings can recognize as part of our nature. This is what allows us the sociability that ultimately leads to Stoic cosmopolitanism. So the idea is that not only do we have, perception of ourselves and a kind of, ingrained desire to remain living, to do what augments our life, but we can come to feel that and even think that in relation to other beings. We can see them, if we want to use the metaphor of the oikos, as part of our own household. In Stoic ethics, this is going to play a very important role. In some of the authors who discuss it explicitly, like, for example, Cicero or Hierocles, there will be this metaphor of concentric circles, each of them getting larger and larger, starting from the individual person, him or herself, and then another very small circle, friends and family, and then extending all the way out to encompass all human beings, or perhaps we might even say all rational creatures within existence. And the idea that often gets talked about in terms of these circles is that oikeiosis can extend from the very small circle, where it's very easy to feel it, outward to these other circles. This is something that we can do by nature, but it's also something that we have to cultivate to a certain degree. And it takes a bit of work. So Hierocles will talk about making these circles smaller. That is a great way of representing, bringing everybody under one great household. And this would make a lot of sense for ancient thinkers, because another way of thinking about the world, or at least a civilization, was as a household, an oikonomike, an economy, we often translate that as, but you could think of it as the commonwealth itself. So this is playing a really major role within Stoic ethics, and it raises all sorts of interesting questions of, is this really selfish or egoist, or is it also altruistic, other-oriented? And the answer is, well, it's actually both. You end up identifying yourself with other people who then you come to care about as if they were, in fact, yourself. So that's a really key conception to this whole idea of oikeiosis. This is oikeiosis in the second sense, not just in the sense of being concerned with ourself and having self-perception. Where would you go if you wanted to learn more about this particular conception of oikeiosis? Well, it does get mentioned a little bit, although not specifically as such, but in terms of other cognates, other words that are closely connected with it. In Diogenes Laertes' Life of Zeno, it's in book 7, chapter 1 of his Lives of the Philosophers, so that's one place to check out. Cicero also discusses this at considerable length and in good detail in two works, the On the Ends, also translated as On Moral Ends, and in On Duties. So that's another place to go. And we also do have this guy, Hierocles. Unfortunately, the works that we do have from him are somewhat fragmentary, but he talks about oikeiosis quite a lot and subjects it to an analysis in his Elements of Ethics and On Appropriate Acts. You'll also find Seneca in letter 121 discussing oikeiosis, but not naming it as such. And if you look at what's going on in Marcus Aurelius and in Epictetus, you'll find them essentially presupposing this conception of oikeiosis with, again, not bringing it up by name, but developing the idea a little bit further. So if you really want to see the term being used a lot, Cicero, Hierocles, and Diogenes Laertes, but you can also find it active within other Stoic thinkers. If you found this answer helpful for you, then please share it with others who might benefit from it. This work is entirely supported by crowdfunding on my Patreon site. So if you find it valuable, consider becoming a supporter at patreon.com/Sadler.